In today's world of social networking, there are many opportunities to follow something or someone or some team. Okay. Of course, you all know the sites. Facebook, something we all use. I follow my son's baseball team from the Czech Republic on Facebook, where each week they place links so that fans like me can watch the game wherever they may be. I watch when I can. I used to never miss a game, and I scored them all, but I've learned that my life is better, sometimes calmer, when I don't follow every moment with bated breath. And why is that? Because sometimes, mostly always, each moment led me to anxious pacing, particularly if my flesh and blood is standing 60 feet from a hard, round ball that could ricochet back at him at 120 miles per hour, and also because his very worth is judged on how well he delivers each pitch or swings the bat. Then there's Twitter, one of my favorite places during times of controversy where people take sides and follow those who believe the same way they do, whether on social issues, faith, or political issues. Twitter was elevated to an extreme popularity during the presidential election, as you can imagine. Of course, there's Instagram, a photo and video sharing platform best used by your cell phone, and tons of others that we could chase down. Religious sites, food sites, a veritable feast of opportunities to become a modern-day groupie, if we want to. It's easy to get sucked into live streaming sites, to any social networking or movie watching site. Key is not letting it take control of our life. Sometimes, without even knowing it's happening, we can get easily addicted to something like that and end up sacrificing moments of life we will never get back. And I am as guilty as everyone else in this regard. Even so, this social networking, this live streaming, and these things we get to do on the computer play a valuable role in our lives. I couldn't have gone to seminary without Zoom. I remember one of the epiphanies that calmed me the most about 15 years ago when one evening during a bad storm, my fear of being alone in my old age was eased, knowing my friends and family were only a click away. Really, I had Facebook. I'd never be alone unless I want to. Most of my friends and relatives are on there. I even message with some of you and others from the church on Facebook. It's where I talk to my mentor, Jeannie Davis. Isn't this life we're in amazing? The things we can do. Used to worry about making a long-distance phone call back when we were children because it was so expensive. Had to ask permission, shocked when we saw it on the bill. Don't have that problem anymore, do we? There are probably hundreds of other platforms I could cite to you. Last week, I discovered TikTok, a site I had heard about but shunned. I didn't need any more social networking in my life, but I decided the only way to see how my youngest son's golden retriever puppy named Scully and their older cat named Chubbs were getting along, the only way was to follow Scully on TikTok. Scully, named after, of course, famed baseball announcer for the Dodgers, Vin Scully, now has his own huge following. The dog has his following. I mean, he's incredibly adorable and funny on TikTok. I'm not kidding either. Scully is a furry phenom. But not as popular, I'm sure, as Jesus was in his day. A popularity which has spanned more than 2 millennia. Now, we are in the time of our Christian year when Jesus has already risen from the dead. But today's narrative placed us before the crucifixion, a time when his popularity was growing in leaps and bounds, and particularly after the raising of Lazarus from the dead. And ironically, while he was facing his final days in Jerusalem, the theme of death, his death, kept surfacing in his parables and direct statements. His followers were growing in numbers. His popularity had reached a peak with the feeding of 5,000 people on a handful of morsels, a miracle mentioned by all 4 gospel writers. The groundswell of support to make Jesus the king deeply impressed his followers. Jesus, however, would not be a king on the crowd's terms. Like we sometimes turn off our followings to focus on what's real in our day-to-day lives, Jesus sometimes walked away from his groupies. He escaped into the hills to pray. He took a different road than he might have. he continued on his lonely mission, stirring up controversy and hatred by healing people on the Sabbath and proclaiming himself equal to God. Many Jews began following Jesus after he brought Lazarus back to life. But simultaneously, religious leaders concluded callously that it was best for one man, Jesus, to die rather than to risk the whole nation. 4 separate times they tried to seize him. Jesus came to offer life to his followers, one of those one-syllable words, life, swollen with meaning that John threaded throughout his narrative. Lazarus received that life in an astonishingly literal way, providing yet another sign of Jesus' ultimate power. Jesus, though, made preparations to give up his own life, making the ultimate sacrifice of the Good Shepherd. Note I say the Good Shepherd, not a Good Shepherd. Probably nowhere else in the New Testament do we see Christ's desire to save his people more than in John, where Jesus proclaims himself the Good Shepherd. Jesus often spoke in these kinds of parables that allowed us to imagine the rural images of that time. And Canaan was largely a pastoral region more than an agricultural one at that time. Shepherds were commonplace. Now, the life of a good shepherd was not an easy one. Aside from the difficult task of keeping watch over many, many sheep, the shepherd was also responsible for finding proper water and adequate nourishment for the sheep that by their nature were afraid of nearly everything. Sheep are so easily frightened that they won't even drink from rapidly moving water, even when they're thirsty. Hence, David states that the Lord, who was his shepherd, led him beside still waters. Then there were issues of disease, exposures to the elements, robbers to contend with, wild animals who would devour the sheep if given a chance. And even the issue of dealing with hired hands who, when danger presented itself, simply ran away to preserve their own life rather than the lives of the sheep. To them, it was only a job. In short, the call of shepherding can be hazardous. The reference to Good Shepherd allows us to see Jesus from a different vantage point, one who sacrifices for the sake of others to keep victory in sight. We all make sacrifices, don't we? Though not for our very lives each day, but we do make sacrifices so we know, at least in part, what it means to be a good shepherd. Just being a parent, a grandparent, and raising children is an enormous sacrifice. The cost of raising a child is huge, over $100,000 I've read, probably more now, and imagine what it will be for our children's children. The cost to our emotions is even larger. Unparalleled joy and grief come from bringing another human being into the world. One father, a Christian dentist named James Reddick, was an example of such parental sacrifice. A small drama that took place on the slopes of Washington's Mount Rainier may shed a bright light on the meaning of the parental Good Shepherd. One Memorial Day weekend, Reddick, a Christian dentist, was teaching his 12-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son the joy of mountain hiking. A sudden storm came up, battering them with hurricane-force winds and thick, wet sheets of snow. A blinding whiteout made it impossible to see or move on the steep slopes. Reddick laboriously began digging a trench with an aluminum mess kit, and then tucked his children into sleeping bags away from the entrance. He covered the opening with a tarp, but as you can imagine, it kept blowing away, exposing the trench to the swirling snow outside. Well, Reddick found he had to lie directly across the opening, using his own weight to hold down the edges of the tarp. His body protected his son and daughter from the howling wind. 2 days passed before searchers finally noticed the corner of a backpack protruding from the deep snow. They rushed to the site, hoping the snow-covered mound would contain the 3 missing hikers. Inside, they found Sharon and David Reddick, very much alive, but the stiff body of their father lay against one wall of the snow cave. He had taken the cold spot, in one searcher's words, by using his own back as the outer wall. An image something like that must have filled the minds of Jesus' listeners as he described a good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. The good shepherd stands ready to sacrifice his total self for the sake of the sheep. Nothing, not ravaging cold, thieves, wolves, would come between a good shepherd and his sheep. He would die for their protection, just like we would die for our own beloved offspring if we needed to. Unlike modern-day shepherds who use dogs to drive their flocks, shepherds in Jesus' day walked ahead of the sheep, calling them to follow. The sheep would only respond to a familiar voice. In the Old Testament, God is also called the shepherd of Israel in the book of Psalms. In claiming to be the good shepherd, Jesus is asserting his leadership over a flock he is willing to die for. When some challenge him bluntly, "If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly," Jesus answers to them with equal bluntness, saying, "I am the Father. I and the Father are one." The pious Jews, understanding Jesus all too well, pick up stones to execute him for blasphemy. Not even those hostile reactions surprise Jesus, though. He expects opposition. He knows about execution. As he explains here, a truly good shepherd, unlike a hired hand, lays down his life for his sheep. Probably nowhere else in the New Testament do we see Christ's desire to save his people more than in today's scripture. The picture of Christ as a shepherd invites us to consider the love, the great love he has for those who are part of his flock. The Good Shepherd knows each of his sheep by name. The Indian theologian D.T. Niles once noticed a young Indian shepherd boy keeping a huge flock of sheep. He stopped and asked him, "How many sheep do you have?" "I don't know," answered the boy. "I can't count." Niles asked him, "Well, how do you know if some of the sheep haven't wandered off when you get to the place where you're going to camp at night?" To his astonishment, the boy answered, "I don't know how many wander off, but I know each one. I can't count, but each sheep has a name, and I know all their names." The Good Shepherd places his body between the sheep and vicious animals. He will die to protect those sheep. So Jesus died for lost people. Now, as we think about who we might follow in this wildly altered world from Jesus' time, I invite you to consider this. There are no instant replays in life like there are for me in baseball. And I can watch Scully terrorize Chubbs over and over again on TikTok if I want to. But that is not the case for us. This life we have is not a dress rehearsal. There are no do-overs for us. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, gave his life for us. He sacrificed his life in order that we might be saved. He willingly gave his life for our lives. He became the sacrificial shepherd for us, and he asks us to remember him and follow his lead so that we may lead a life ordered by his morally pure ways. We must follow these ways, practice grace, show restraint, give mercy, engage in daily prayer, and his messages with obedience. These are just a few of the ways we must behave if we are to be Jesus' true followers, and not just groupies to whatever current fad has caught our fancy like TikTok. We are sheep in one way, part of Christ's earthly flock, but we are not blind or stupid. We know just who to follow, the one who feeds us. Let us not forget each and every day who that is, and we will surely never stray. Let us